It was 1:14 in the morning when someone knocked on my door, not rang the bell, knocked, three quiet knocks, careful enough that they almost disappeared into the rain. I looked up from the kitchen table where a cold cup of coffee had been pretending to help me finish a stack of work. My apartment building had a strange relationship with midnight visitors. Usually it was someone who had lost their keys, their wallet, or occasionally their sense of direction. I checked the clock again. 1:14. Nobody brings good news at 1:14. The knocking came a second time. Three slow taps. I walked toward the door, more annoyed than worried. The hallway light outside had been broken for weeks, and through the peephole all I could see was a blurred shape standing perfectly still. For a second, I thought it was a delivery driver. Then the figure shifted. A strand of pale hair caught the weak emergency light from the stairwell. My hand froze on the lock. No, that wasn't possible. I opened the door. She was standing there. Emily Carter, my best friend. 3 days earlier, I had watched her get married. I had worn a dark suit I hated because she once told me navy made me look trustworthy. I had smiled for photographs, carried folding chairs after the ceremony, and spent an entire evening pretending that seeing her promise forever to another man wasn't quietly tearing something apart inside me. Now she was standing outside my apartment, alone. She wore the same cream-colored coat from the airport photographs her mother had posted online, but it was wrinkled now, damp from the rain. One of the buttons was missing. Her hair had been pinned up once, carefully, but most of it had fallen loose around her face. A black suitcase stood beside her. The handle was cracked. There was a luggage tag hanging from it with the name of a beach resort nearly 3,000 miles away. Her honeymoon, or what should have been her honeymoon. She looked exhausted. Not the kind of tired that comes from missing sleep. The kind that comes from carrying something too heavy for too long. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Rain drifted through the open hallway window behind her. Somewhere downstairs, an elevator opened and closed. Emily looked at me with red eyes that somehow seemed completely dry. "You look surprised," she said. My brain tried to arrange 100 questions into a sensible order. Where is Daniel? Why are you here? Are you hurt? Did something happen? Instead, the only thing that came out was, "You should be in Italy." A small smile touched her face. It lasted less than a second. "I was," she said quietly. The answer explained nothing. Her fingers tightened around the suitcase handle. Then I noticed something that made the back of my neck go cold. She wasn't wearing her wedding ring. I looked at her hand, looked away, looked back again. Still nothing. She saw me notice. Her eyes dropped to the floor. "I know what you're thinking," she whispered. I wasn't sure that I did. The hallway suddenly felt too narrow. The rain sounded louder. Emily took one slow breath. "I need you to do me a favor." "What kind of favor?" "For 1 minute." Her voice almost failed. "Don't ask me why I came here." A thousand terrible possibilities crowded into the silence between us. She looked like someone who had left a fire behind and wasn't certain it had stopped burning. I stepped back from the doorway. "Come inside," I said. I stood there for a second after she crossed the doorway, one hand still resting on the lock, as though closing the door would make sense of what I had just seen. It didn't. The apartment suddenly felt smaller. There were work papers spread across the dining table, a half-finished sketch pinned to the wall, and a basil plant on the kitchen window that had somehow survived 3 months of my neglect. Emily looked at all of it quietly, like someone walking through a museum dedicated to a life she used to know. She set the suitcase beside the couch. It tipped over and landed on its side. Neither of us picked it up. "I can leave if this is a bad time," she said. I looked at the clock. "It's 1 in the morning." "That sounds like a yes." "Emily." She finally looked at me. "When have you ever knocked on my door because you were worried about my schedule?" A tired laugh escaped her before she could stop it. "There you are. There who is. The version of you that makes jokes when things are falling apart." I leaned against the kitchen counter. "That strategy has worked surprisingly well. It really hasn't." She was right. It never had. I walked to the cupboard and reached for 2 mugs without thinking. The blue one with the chipped handle was hers. She had bought it for me years ago. After I complained that all my dishes looked like they belonged to a divorced accountant, she noticed it immediately. "You kept that ugly thing. It has character. It has water damage. That is character for mugs." Her fingers brushed across the rim before she let go. The movement was so small that most people would have missed it. I didn't. I had known Emily for 9 years. Long enough to know that she touched things when she was nervous. Long enough to know she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was about to lie. Long enough to know that she smiled at strangers, even when she was unhappy because she hated making other people uncomfortable. I filled the kettle. The sound of running water settled into the silence between us. 3 days ago, I had watched her walk across a flower-covered chapel toward another man, Daniel Foster. Confident, successful. The sort of man people described as impressive after talking to him for 5 minutes. The sort of man mothers wanted for their daughters. I had shaken his hand. I had congratulated him. I had even helped carry wedding gifts to his car because apparently heartbreak comes with free manual labor. Emily wandered toward the window. Rain streaked across the glass, turning the city lights into blurred lines of gold. "You should have stayed longer after the ceremony," she said. "I thought newly married people usually prefer privacy, B." You disappeared. I looked down at the kettle. I figured you had enough people around you. She nodded once. I looked for you. The words landed harder than they should have. I remembered the reception. The music, the speeches, the first dance. I remembered standing near the back of the room and watching her laugh while everyone around her celebrated a future that already seemed written. I had left before dessert. Cowardice has a remarkable talent for disguising itself as politeness. The kettle clicked. I poured hot water into the mugs. She wrapped both hands around hers but didn't drink. The steam drifted between us. "I almost called you," she said. "When?" She stared into the cup. "At the airport." My heartbeat slowed and quickened at the same time. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to ask what happened. I wanted to ask where her husband was. Instead, I asked the safest question I could find. "Why didn't you?" Her smile returned, small and fragile. "Because I was afraid you would answer." The apartment went quiet again. Outside, a car rolled through the wet street. Inside, the old refrigerator hummed softly. Emily looked exhausted, not broken, not defeated. Just tired in a way that made me think she had spent days pretending to be someone else. Then she reached into the pocket of her coat. For one impossible second, I thought she was going to show me a plane ticket, or a letter, or divorce papers. Instead, she placed something on the table between us, a plain gold wedding ring. It rolled once, stopped, neither of us touched it. She looked at the ring, then at me. "I know you have questions," she said quietly. I opened my mouth. She shook her head. "Please." There was fear in her voice now. "Just let me sit here for one more minute before I tell you how I ruined everything." The ring stayed between us, a simple band of gold. It should have looked ordinary. Instead, it sat on my kitchen table like evidence from a crime nobody had confessed to yet. Emily never took her eyes off it, neither did I. People imagine moments like that are dramatic. They expect thunder music, someone crying. The truth is quieter. A refrigerator hums. Rain touches the windows. The clock on the wall keeps counting seconds that suddenly feel expensive. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. The table was small enough that if either of us reached forward, our hands would meet. Neither of us moved. "I didn't ruin the wedding," she said softly. The sentence caught me off guard. I had expected her to say the marriage. Or the honeymoon, not the wedding. I looked at the ring again. "What does that mean?" She rubbed her palms together slowly. "The wedding happened exactly the way everyone wanted. Emily." My parents smiled. She swallowed. "Daniel smiled. The guests smiled. The photographs are probably beautiful." She let out a tired breath. I smiled too. Something about the way she said it made the room feel colder. "You sound like you weren't there." She looked at me then. I wasn't. I wanted to ask what that meant. Instead, I waited. She had always hated being interrupted. When we were younger, she used to tell stories the way painters worked, adding one careful detail after another until the whole picture existed. If you rushed her, she stopped talking. The silence stretched, then she glanced toward the suitcase by the couch. "I haven't opened it. You just got here. I mean, since the airport." My eyes followed hers, the cracked handle, the airline tag, a smear of dirt near one wheel. "You came straight here." She nodded. "I didn't go home." "What about your parents?" "No. Your sister?" Another quiet shake of her head. A strange feeling settled into my chest. Not hope. Hope would have been selfish. This was something heavier. The realization that out of everyone in her life, she had chosen my door. She must have seen the thought cross my face. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make this mean something it doesn't." I looked away. "I'm trying very hard not to make it mean anything." She gave a sad little smile. "You were always a terrible liar." I almost answered. Instead, my attention caught on a dark mark near the sleeve of her coat. At first, I thought it was rain. Then I realized it had dried, a faint brown stain, coffee maybe, mud, or something else. She noticed me looking. Her hand moved over it immediately. "It's nothing." The speed of the answer made me believe the opposite. I remembered a summer years ago when she had fallen off a bicycle and hidden a broken wrist because she didn't want to ruin a family vacation. Emily had never been good at admitting she was hurt. "What happened?" "Nothing. You just covered it, I know, so tell me." She looked down. "I dropped a cup in Italy?" She nodded. The story felt unfinished. I let it stay that way. People only lie when the truth costs too much. The wind pushed rain against the windows harder. Somewhere outside, a siren passed through the city. Emily reached for the mug I had made her. Her hands were trembling. Very slightly, just enough that the tea rippled. I had seen those hands paint school murals, fix broken picture frames, and once change a tire in the middle of nowhere while I stood nearby pretending to be useful. I had never seen them shake. "You don't have to tell me tonight," I said. "Yes, I do. You look exhausted." "I am, then sleep." She looked at me with an expression I couldn't understand. "I haven't really slept." She closed her eyes. No. The answer sat between us. I could feel questions gathering again. Did they fight? Did he leave? Did she leave? Was she afraid? Was someone looking for her? Then she reached into the inside pocket of her coat very carefully. She took out a folded piece of white paper. The edges were bent. One corner looked like it had been crushed in someone's hand. She placed it beside the wedding ring. I could see my name written across the front. Nothing else, just my name. I stared at it. "When did you write that?" She didn't answer. "Emily?" "I didn't write it." A chill moved through me. "Then who did?" She looked at the envelope. The strength she had been holding together since she arrived seemed to disappear all at once. Her voice was almost a whisper. "Daniel found it in my suitcase." She looked up at me. "And he thinks you wrote it." For a moment, I thought I had heard her wrong. The envelope stayed on the table. My name, her wedding ring, a cup of tea neither of us had touched. They looked less like ordinary objects and more like pieces of a story someone else had started writing. I looked at the handwriting. It wasn't mine. I knew that immediately. Not because I recognized every curve of my own signature, but because whoever had written my name had done it carefully, almost gently, as if they had been afraid to damage it. "I've never seen that before," I said. Emily nodded. "I know." The answer surprised me. "You know," she folded her arms, not defensively, but like someone trying to stay warm. "Daniel asked me the same question, and I told him you didn't write it." A strange silence settled over the apartment. Rain slid down the window behind her. The suitcase still lay where she had dropped it. I found myself staring at it again. People don't carry mysteries. They carry clothes, toothbrushes, books, the ordinary things of ordinary lives. That suitcase looked ordinary, and somehow I was becoming more certain that it wasn't. "When did he find it?" I asked. "The second night, the honeymoon." She gave a small nod. I couldn't quite make those two words belong together. Honeymoon, envelope, fear. They felt like objects from different worlds. "He was looking for my passport," she said. "It had slipped into the lining of the suitcase, and he found this instead." Her eyes drifted toward the envelope. "He thought I was hiding something." "Were you?" She looked at me for a long time. Then she answered with a question of her own. "Have you ever forgotten you put something somewhere?" "Of course, and then found it months later?" I nodded. Her voice became quieter. "I don't remember putting that in my suitcase." A cold feeling worked its way through me. "You don't remember?" "No." "You packed your own things?" "Yes." "And you never saw it?" "No." I reached toward the envelope. My fingers stopped an inch away. Something about touching it felt wrong, as though opening it would force the night to become something neither of us could undo. Emily noticed. "You don't have to." "What if we should? What if we shouldn't?" Neither of us moved. I leaned back in the chair. "Tell me about Daniel." Her expression changed, not anger, not sadness, something more complicated, carefulness. "Why?" "Because I don't know where this story starts." A tired breath escaped her. "Neither do I." The answer was honest. That made it worse. She walked to the window and stood there with her back to me. "When people met Daniel," she said, "they loved him. I remember. He was kind. I remember that too. He remembered birthdays. He brought flowers to your mother. He sent my father expensive whiskey every Christmas." I smiled faintly. "He also beat me at chess 4 times." She almost smiled. "He practiced before inviting you over." That sounded like Daniel, prepared, controlled. Intentional. The smile faded before it fully arrived. "He liked things to make sense. Most people do." "No." She looked out at the rain. "I mean everything. Schedules, plans, conversations." If something didn't fit the picture he had in his head, she stopped. I waited. He couldn't leave it alone. The words stayed in the air. I thought about the envelope, a name, a hidden object, a question without an answer. "What did he say?" I asked. "When he found it." Emily closed her eyes. "He asked me if I loved you." The room felt strangely still. I had imagined that question 100 times over the years, usually in impossible daydreams, never like this. "What did you tell him?" Her hand tightened against the window frame. "I told him he was asking the wrong question." My heartbeat stumbled. "What was the right question?" She turned toward me. Her eyes looked exhausted, honest, afraid. He should have asked why I couldn't answer. Neither of us spoke. The apartment seemed to shrink around that single sentence. The rain, the clock, the quiet kitchen, all of it faded. My eyes dropped back to the envelope. "You still haven't told me something." "What?" If you believed I didn't write it, she already knew. I could see it in her face. Why did you bring it here? Emily looked at the envelope, then at the cracked suitcase, then back at me. Because before I left, her voice almost disappeared. Daniel opened it. I stared at her, and she swallowed once. There wasn't any letter inside. The silence that followed felt heavier than the rain. There was only one piece of paper. What did it say? She looked at me like she wished she could change the answer. It was blank. Then, after a long pause, she whispered, "But Daniel swore there had been writing on it before I saw it." Neither of us looked at the blank page. It lay on the table beside the ring and the envelope, and somehow that made it worse. If there had been words, they could have been argued with, explained, denied. A blank page leaves too much room for imagination. Emily pulled the sleeves of her coat over her hands the way she used to when winter arrived before she was ready for it. "I know how this sounds," she said. "I don't think you do." A tired laugh escaped her. "Fair." I stood and carried our untouched mugs to the kitchen, not because I wanted more tea, because I needed a reason to move. The apartment had begun to feel like a room where people waited for doctors to return with test results. Behind me, Emily spoke quietly. "You're scared." "I don't know what I am. You're trying to solve it." I filled the kettle again. "I solve things for a living. You draw buildings. I make sure they don't fall down." She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "I think my life just did." The words stayed with me. I turned around. She was no longer looking at the table. She was looking at the bookshelf by the window. A small wooden whale sat on the top shelf, blue paint, crooked tail, one eye slightly larger than the other. She walked over and picked it up carefully. "You kept Marvin." I smiled despite myself. "He survived 3 apartments. He was supposed to be ugly. He succeeded." Her thumb brushed over the chipped paint. "I made this for you 6 years ago. I know, you told me lonely whales needed friends. I still think they do." She looked down at the little carving. "I was having a bad week. You failed that art grant. And my landlord raised the rent, and you dropped an entire tray of coffee on your principal." Her mouth twitched. "He deserved some of it." I laughed quietly. For a second, the apartment felt normal again. Then she looked at the whale and whispered, "You were there." The smile disappeared. "I was always there." "I know. No matter what happened." "I know. You called me when your father got sick." She nodded. "When your car died." Another nod. "When you thought you were getting fired." Her eyes glistened. "And when I couldn't decide whether to marry Daniel." The room went still. I had forgotten how to breathe quietly. "You called me," I said. 3 nights before the wedding. You talked for 4 hours. I remember. You never told me not to marry him." I looked toward the rain outside. "I didn't think that was my decision. It would have been easier if you had." The honesty of it hurt. "I spent that whole night waiting for you to say something selfish." My voice came out lower than I expected. "And if I had?" She looked at me. "I don't know." The answer felt more dangerous than certainty. She placed the little whale back on the shelf, perfectly straight. She had always done that. Every object she touched somehow ended up exactly where it belonged, except, apparently, herself. "I thought love was supposed to feel responsible," she said. "What does that mean?" "My mother used to say that passion fades." I stayed quiet. She said good marriages were built on sensible choices. Daniel was sensible. Very. He had a plan for everything. She smiled sadly. "Our first house, our retirement, the names of our future children." My chest tightened. "You never told me that." I didn't tell anyone. She looked toward the wedding ring. I kept waiting to feel grateful. And every time I imagined my future." She stopped. The silence stretched between us. I didn't push. She walked to the window. Outside, the rain had softened into a mist that blurred the streetlights. "When I imagined growing old," she whispered, "I never saw his face." I looked at the floor because looking at her suddenly felt unfair. "I saw movie nights." She smiled faintly. "I saw burned dinners. I saw someone making terrible jokes when life got hard." I laughed once. It sounded unsteady. "I saw coffee mugs that should have been thrown away years ago." My eyes found the blue mug sitting beside the sink, and I saw this apartment. I finally looked at her. She wasn't crying. That somehow made it harder. "I hated myself for it," she admitted. "I thought something was wrong with me." "There isn't. How do you know?" "Because I've spent 7 years pretending I didn't feel exactly the same." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Neither of us moved. The confession hung in the quiet kitchen like a door opening somewhere in the dark. Emily's eyes widened, not with surprise, with recognition, as though she had been carrying the same secret for so long that hearing it aloud felt strangely familiar. She took one slow step toward me, then another. She stopped close enough that I could see the tiny silver thread caught in the sleeve of her coat. "I think," she said softly, "that's why the blank page scared Daniel." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked back at the envelope. He thought there had been a letter, a confession, a promise, a secret. Her gaze returned to mine. But maybe, her voice almost disappeared. Maybe he realized he didn't need words to know who I was thinking about. The kettle clicked behind me. Neither of us moved to turn it off. The kettle clicked off. The sound was small. Ordinary, it should have broken the tension in the room. Instead, it seemed to make the silence deeper. Emily and I stood facing each other with years of unsaid things hanging between us. 7 years. 7 years of birthdays and hospital waiting rooms, late-night phone calls, broken furniture assembled badly, road trips, coffee, Christmas dinners, and now a wedding ring sitting on my kitchen table. I looked away first, not because I wanted to, because I had spent too much of my life teaching myself not to look at her for too long. I shouldn't have said that, I murmured. Her voice was quiet. Why? Because you're married. The words felt wrong the moment they left my mouth. Her eyes drifted to the ring. I'm not sure I ever really was. I closed my eyes for a second. That wasn't fair, not to Daniel, not to her, not to me. You loved him. I tried to. The answer landed heavily. She walked past me and picked up the blue mug from the counter. It had a crack running through one side. She traced it with her thumb. Do you remember when you broke this? I dropped it. You lied. I blinked. You told me the cat knocked it over. I don't own a cat. I know. A tiny smile appeared. It was a very bad lie. I laughed softly. I've never been particularly gifted at them. No. She looked at me. You haven't. The smile faded. I wish I had. I frowned. What does that mean? She carried the mug back to the table and sat down. Her shoulders seemed smaller somehow, as though she had finally become tired of carrying herself. There was a moment, she said, at the wedding. My heartbeat quickened. She looked at the blank page, then at the ring, then somewhere beyond both. The music started. The doors took my arm. My father took my arm. I could hear people crying. Her voice was distant, now, like she was walking back into a place she'd been trying to escape. I remember looking at everyone. My mother, my sister, Daniel, the flowers, the stained glass windows. She stopped. And then I looked at the last row. I felt something tighten in my chest. You were standing there. I said nothing. You were smiling. I thought I was. She shook her head. No. Her eyes met mine. You were pretending. The truth of it hurt. I looked down at my hands. I thought if I didn't look unhappy, I could make it easier for you. A tear finally escaped her. She brushed it away impatiently. That's the problem. What? You were always making things easier for me. The apartment was quiet except for the rain. She folded her hands together. I walked to the altar. I repeated the vows. I smiled for photographs. I danced. I thanked people. I cut the cake. Her breathing became uneven. And the entire time, she stopped. I waited. The entire time I kept thinking about one stupid thing. What? The camping trip 3 years ago. I stared at her. The lake? She nodded. You fell asleep by the fire. You put your jacket over me because you thought I was cold. I woke up before you. Her laugh came out fragile. I absolutely was not. You absolutely were. For a second, we both smiled. Then she whispered, I almost kissed you. The room seemed to lose all sound. I didn't. I stood up. I walked to the lake. I told myself it was ridiculous. I told myself people don't throw away good relationships because of one moment. She looked at the wedding ring. So I buried it. My voice barely worked. And the wedding, I thought if I married Daniel, that feeling would disappear. I sat down across from her. Neither of us touched the table. Neither of us touched the ring. It didn't. A slow shake of her head. No. She looked exhausted. I stood at the altar. The officiant asked me to repeat the vows. I opened my mouth. Her hands began to tremble again. I wasn't thinking about the flowers, or the guests, or my family. I was thinking about a lake, a blue mug, a ridiculous wooden whale. A man who always put everyone else first. I felt my pulse in my throat. She looked directly at me. And I said your name. I forgot to breathe. The rain outside seemed to disappear. The apartment disappeared. Everything disappeared except the woman sitting across from me. You, my voice failed. She nodded once. I said your name. I stared at her. What happened? The church went quiet. My father looked confused. My sister started crying. Daniel thought he had misheard. And you? She smiled sadly. I wished the floor would open. You corrected yourself? Immediately. But it was too late. I remembered the wedding, the strange silence, the whispers, the way she had refused to meet anyone's eyes afterward. I had told myself I imagined it. I thought I was losing my mind, I whispered. So did I. A long silence settled over us. Then I looked at the blank sheet of paper. The envelope. She nodded. Daniel found it after that. He thought I had written to you. But there was nothing inside. Nothing. I looked at her. Then why did he believe there had been? Emily's eyes filled again. Because he looked at me after the ceremony. Her voice broke. And he said, no woman accident. I didn't know what to say. There are moments in life that arrive too late for rehearsed speeches for 7 years. I had imagined 100 impossible conversations with Emily. None of them had ended with her telling me she had spoken my name while marrying someone else. The rain outside had almost stopped. Water slid slowly down the window, catching the yellow glow from the streetlights. The apartment felt strangely suspended, as if the rest of the city had continued moving and forgotten about us. Emily looked down at the wedding ring. I didn't mean to hurt him. I believed her. That was the problem. Cruel people usually know exactly what they are doing. Can people destroy themselves trying not to hurt anyone? What happened after the ceremony? I asked. She let out a slow breath. Everyone pretended. Pretended? She nodded. My aunt started talking louder. The musicians played. The photographer told everyone to smile. My mother squeezed my arm so hard I thought she might leave fingerprints. Her mouth twitched sadly. And Daniel? He smiled. That answer unsettled me. He smiled. He kissed my forehead. He thanked the guests. He shook hands. He acted as if nothing had happened. I frowned. That doesn't make sense, I know. She folded her hands together. I kept waiting for him to ask. When? In the car, at the hotel, but he didn't. The silence stretched. Then when did he? She looked toward the cracked suitcase. The second night, I followed. Her eyes, he unpacked our things. He was folding clothes. I was standing by the balcony. He found the envelope. Her voice had become distant again. He held it up and asked me who Owen was. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because the question was absurd. He knows who I am. He does now. The answer made my stomach tighten. What do you mean? She stood and walked to the window. The man I married knew facts. He knew my birthday, my favorite flowers, the names of my teachers, the size of my shoes. She rested her hand against the glass. But I don't think he ever believed people could love someone without saying it. I stayed quiet. He looked at the envelope. He looked at me. And then he said something I can't stop hearing. I waited. He said, her voice dropped to almost nothing. I don't think you've ever looked at me the way you look at him. The apartment felt colder. I remembered every family dinner, every holiday, every afternoon spent pretending friendship was enough. Had it really been that obvious? Emily gave a weak laugh. I denied it. You should have. I told him he was imagining things. Her shoulders sagged. And then he asked me to throw the envelope away. You didn't. She shook her head. I couldn't. Why? She turned around slowly. Because I wanted to know what was inside. I looked at the blank page. There was nothing. I know, but before I opened it, her eyes searched mine. I hoped there would be. The honesty of that hurt more than it should have. You wanted a letter? I wanted an explanation. For what? For why it always felt like I was leaving something unfinished every time I walked away from you. Neither of us spoke. Outside, a car passed through the wet street. Its headlights moved across the ceiling and disappeared. Emily walked back to the table. She picked up the wedding ring, held it in her palm. I tried to fix it, the marriage, she nodded. The next morning I told Daniel we should forget everything. I told him it was nerves, stress, wedding panic. And what did he say? She stared at the ring. He asked me one question. I waited. Her fingers closed around the gold band. If Owen knocked on your door tonight, would you go to him? My chest tightened. What did you tell him? She looked at me. The exhaustion was still there, the sadness. The fear, but there was something else now, the strange calm that comes after a person stops lying to themselves. I didn't answer. A silence settled between us. Then she slowly opened her hand. The ring caught the kitchen light. Because, she whispered, 24 hours later, she looked at my front door. I was already standing outside it. I looked at the front door. The paint around the frame was chipped. The brass handle needed tightening. I had been meaning to fix both for months. Funny the things your mind notices when it is trying very hard not to think about something else. Emily was standing only a few feet away. The same woman who had walked toward another man at an altar. The same woman who had crossed half the world to knock on my door. The same woman who had just admitted that when her husband asked if she would come to me, she already had. I should have felt victorious. I didn't. I felt tired, confused, and unexpectedly sorry for a man I had spent years trying not to hate. He loved you, I said. Emily lowered her eyes. I know. He built a future with you. I know, and now he's sitting somewhere wondering why his wife left. Her voice was barely audible. I know that too. The apartment fell silent again. She didn't defend herself. She didn't blame Daniel. She didn't tell me the marriage had been terrible, that honesty somehow made everything harder. People like simple stories, a villain, a hero, a clear reason. Real life rarely bothers with those. I walked to the window. The rain had stopped completely now. The pavement below reflected the streetlights like dark glass. When I was 12, I said quietly, my father told me something. Emily looked up. He said the hardest part of becoming an adult was realizing that good people can still break each other's hearts. She watched me carefully. I thought he was wrong, and now? I laughed once. I think he was trying to warn me. Neither of us moved. The blank sheet of paper still rested on the table. The wedding ring lay beside it. One represented a promise. The other represented everything that had never been said. I don't want you to regret this, I said. Her answer came immediately. I regret waiting. No. I turned toward her. I mean tomorrow, the day after. A year from now, when this stops feeling impossible. She held my gaze. I've been regretting the opposite for years. The words settled heavily between us. She walked slowly across the room until she stood beside the bookshelf again. Her fingers brushed the little blue whale. Do you know what I kept thinking on the flight home? I shook my head. I kept remembering your birthday. I frowned. My birthday? 3 years ago, the karaoke place. Despite everything, I smiled. I was strongly encouraged to forget that night. You sang. I apologize for that. You sang an old love song. I was very out of tune. You looked at me the whole time. The memory returned all at once, the noisy bar, her laughing. Too many people, not enough courage. I thought you didn't notice. I noticed, she smiled sadly. I noticed everything about you. My heart seemed to forget its rhythm. I noticed when you stopped dating. I noticed when you brought an extra coffee because you knew I'd forget breakfast. I noticed you always sat where you could see the front door if we were meeting somewhere. I frowned. Why would that matter? So you'd be the first person to see me arrive. I had never realized I did that. Emily looked toward the blank page. Daniel was wrong about one thing. What? He thought I had been writing letters to you in my heart. Her eyes met mine. I wasn't. The room became very still. I was building a life with you in my head. I couldn't answer. She looked frightened after saying it, as though the truth sounded larger outside her own thoughts. I know how that sounds. No. My voice came out rough. I think I know exactly how it sounds. She searched my face. Then say something. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. 7 years of words pressed against the back of my throat. 3 simple words, too late, too dangerous, too selfish. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. Why didn't you come sooner? Emily closed her eyes, a single tear slipped down her cheek. Because I thought love was something you earned by making the right choices. And now? She opened her eyes again. I think love might be the thing that keeps following you after you've made all the wrong ones. Neither of us noticed the vibration at first, a low sound against the wooden table. Then it came again. Emily looked down, her phone. The screen lit the room with a pale blue glow. One name filled the display. Daniel. It rang once, twice, 3 times. She didn't move, the call stopped. A second later, a message appeared. Emily stared at it, her face lost what little color it had left. What is it? I asked. She didn't answer. I stepped closer. Slowly, she turned the phone toward me. There were only 6 words on the screen. I know where you are. Then, before either of us could speak, someone knocked on my front door. 3 quiet knocks, exactly the same as before. I didn't move. Neither did Emily. The knocking came again, 3 slow taps, not angry, not impatient, certain the kind of knock that assumes the door will eventually open. Emily was still holding the phone. The message glowed against the darkness. I know where you are. Asterisk, her fingers had gone white around the edges of the case. I looked at the front door, then at her. Did you tell anyone? I asked. She shook her head. My mother knew I was leaving, but she didn't know where. Your sister? Anyone else? No. The knocking came a third time. Emily took a small step backward. I don't want him to see me. I looked toward the peephole. My apartment suddenly felt unfamiliar, the bookshelf, the blue whale, the mugs, the ring on the table. All of it seemed to belong to someone else's life. I'll talk to him. She caught my sleeve. Owen, I turned. If it's him. Her voice trembled. Don't make this worse. I almost smiled. You still think I'm the reckless one? I know you. I've seen you try to fix impossible things. I looked at her hand holding my arm. You came to the wrong apartment if you wanted sensible decisions. A weak laugh escaped her. It disappeared almost immediately. The knocking stopped, silence settled over the hallway. I walked to the door anyway, every step felt louder than it should have. I looked through the peephole, the corridor was empty, no Daniel, no stranger, no one. I frowned, then I noticed something on the floor. An envelope. I opened the door slowly, cold air drifted inside. The hallway lights buzzed overhead, the envelope was plain white, no stamp, no address, just one word written across the front. Emily. I picked it up. There was nobody at either end of the corridor. The elevator was closed, the stairwell door was shut. The building felt abandoned. When I stepped back inside, Emily had gone pale. Don't! She didn't even look at it. Please don't open it. You know what this is? She nodded once. He does this. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? When he can't control a conversation, she swallowed. He writes one. I looked at the envelope. He left you letters? No, he left reminders. The answer unsettled me. I sat the envelope beside the blank page, beside the wedding ring, three silent objects. Three different kinds of promises. Emily stared at them. He always believed everything had an explanation, and if he couldn't find one, he created one. I looked at the unopened envelope. What do you think is inside? Her eyes filled. A version of me that is easier for him to understand. The phone in her hand buzzed again, another message. She read it, closed her eyes. What did he say? He said I don't have to be afraid. I waited. He said he only wants to talk. And do you believe him? She didn't answer. That was answer enough. I pulled out a chair. Sit down. She stayed where she was. I can't. Why? Because if I sit down, she looked around the apartment. It starts feeling safe. I understood then. Safe places are dangerous when you think they might disappear. I walked to the table and picked up the wedding ring. The gold felt strangely heavy. You should keep this. She stared at it. No, it's yours. It was. I placed it back beside the blank page. You don't have to decide tonight. I already did. Her voice was quiet now, steady. I decided when I got on the plane. The apartment seemed to shrink around us. What happens tomorrow? I meet him, and then I tell him the truth. What truth? She looked directly at me. That I cannot build a life with someone while my heart belongs somewhere else. My chest tightened. Emily, she shook her head. No, you don't get to rescue me. I'm not trying to. Yes, you are. A sad smile touched her face. You've been trying to rescue everyone since you were 16. I laughed softly. I wasn't very good at it. No, she took one step toward me. You were just good at staying. The words stayed with me through every birthday, every holiday, every ordinary afternoon. I had stayed not because I was brave, because leaving had always felt impossible. The envelope on the table suddenly seemed unimportant. The blank page, the mysterious message, even Daniel waiting somewhere in the city. For one suspended moment, none of it mattered. Only the woman standing in my apartment. The woman who had crossed an ocean carrying a suitcase and a secret. She reached into the pocket of her coat, very slowly. I thought she might take out another letter, another mystery. Instead, she pulled out a folded photograph. She handed it to me. It was from the wedding. The photographer had caught the moment just before the ceremony began. The guests were standing. Daniel was waiting at the altar. Emily was walking down the aisle. And in the far corner of the picture, almost hidden behind a column, was me. I was looking at her. She wasn't looking at Daniel, she was looking at me. I raised my eyes. When did you see this? She smiled sadly. On the flight home, and I finally understood what he knew. A quiet tear slipped down her cheek. Because no matter how hard we tried, her voice almost broke. We stopped hiding from each other long before we realized it. Then someone tried the handle of my front door slowly once. And this time, it wasn't locked. The handle moved, not hard, not violently. Just enough to tell us someone on the other side knew the door was there. Emily stopped breathing. I could see it happen. Her shoulders stiffened, her eyes fixed on the brass handle as though looking away might make it disappear. The handle settled back into place. Then came silence. I stepped forward. She caught my wrist. Owen, her voice was barely more than air. Don't, I looked at her. If it's Daniel, I need to do this. I frowned. Do what? She swallowed. Stop hiding behind people who love me. The words hurt because they were true. She had hidden behind her parents, behind expectations, behind a wedding, and perhaps without meaning to, she had hidden behind me too. The handle moved again. This time there was a soft knock, just one. Emily closed her eyes. I know that knock. A strange coldness settled over me. You really think it's him? She nodded. He never pounds on doors. He waits. I looked at the lock, then back at her. You don't have to answer, yes. Her eyes opened. I think I do. She let go of my wrist and walked toward the table. The wedding ring still rested beside the blank page and the unopened envelope. She looked at all three. Then she picked up the ring. She held it in her hand for a long moment. Not lovingly, not angrily. The way people hold old photographs, with respect for something that mattered once. She slipped the ring into the envelope. Then she folded the blank page in half and placed it beside it. I watched quietly. What are you doing? She looked at me. I think this belongs to the past now. Another soft knock. My apartment seemed smaller than ever. Emily took one slow breath. I spent my whole life trying to become the person everyone expected. She smiled sadly. My parents, my teachers, Daniel, myself. She looked down at the envelope. And somewhere along the way, I forgot to ask what I wanted. The hallway outside remained quiet. No voices, no footsteps. Only waiting. She looked at me again. Do you remember the mural at my school? The one with the ocean? She nodded. The children kept asking why one whale was swimming away from the others. I smiled faintly. You told them he wasn't lost. I told them he was finally going home. The memory settled gently between us. She laughed once. I think I was trying to convince myself. I wanted to say something. Something wise, something that would make the fear disappear. Instead, I told the truth. I'm scared. Her expression softened. So am I. The honesty made the room feel less lonely. She walked toward the door, slowly. I moved with her. When we reached it, she rested her hand against the wood. For a second, she simply stood there listening, then she looked back at me. If I open this, everything changes. I nodded. I know, if he hates me, I waited. If people hate me. She stopped. What if they're right? I stepped closer, close enough to see that her wedding hair was finally coming loose completely. A few strands rested against her cheek. You asked me once what I thought courage was. A faint smile touched her lips. You gave a terrible answer. I know. You said courage was jumping. It was a bad metaphor. It was a terrible metaphor. I smiled. I think I know the real answer now. She waited. Courage is telling the truth after you've spent years building a life around a lie. Her eyes filled. A tear slipped free. Not dramatic, not broken, just honest. She reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold. I wish I had met you later. The words caught me completely off guard. Why? So I wouldn't have hurt anyone. I shook my head. No. She frowned. If we had met later, I looked at our hands. I would have missed every ordinary day that made me love you. The silence that followed felt impossibly gentle. The fear was still there. The unanswered questions, Daniel, the envelope, the blank page. Tomorrow, all of it. But for one quiet moment, none of those things stood between us. Emily squeezed my hand, then she turned back toward the door very slowly. She unlocked it. Her hand rested on the handle. She took one breath, two, then she opened the door. The hallway was empty. No Daniel, no stranger, no footsteps, just the yellow light and the quiet apartment building. She looked down. A single folded note rested against the threshold. She picked it up. Her hands trembled. What does it say? I asked. She unfolded the paper. Write one line. Then looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Relief, fear, and something dangerously close to hope. She handed me the note. In careful handwriting, there were only 5 words. You deserve to choose now. I read the note twice, then a third time. Asterisk, you deserve to choose now. There was no signature, no explanation, no anger, no accusation. Just 5 quiet words written by a hand I didn't recognize. Emily stood beside me in the open doorway. The hallway was empty, the old ceiling light buzzed softly. Somewhere on another floor, a television was playing through a wall thin enough to let laughter escape. Ordinary sounds, an ordinary building, an ordinary night. Nothing about it felt ordinary anymore. Is it his writing? I asked. She looked at the paper. Then she slowly shook her head. No. You've never seen it before? No. A small breeze drifted through the hallway and touched the edges of the note. Emily closed the door gently, not because she was afraid, because she seemed tired of leaving things open. She walked back to the kitchen table. The envelope was still there, the wedding ring inside it, the blank page folded beside it. The 3 of them looked strangely complete now, as though they belonged together. I sat across from her. Neither of us spoke. The silence had changed. When she first arrived, it had been filled with fear. Now it was filled with decisions. She reached for the note. Her fingertips moved across the paper. I spent so much time waiting for permission, she whispered. Permission from who? She smiled sadly. My family, my teachers, the man I married, myself. I watched her fold the note carefully. I thought if everyone else was happy, eventually I would be too. And were you? She looked at the blue mug sitting near the sink. No. The answer was simple. Simple answers are often the hardest to hear. I leaned back in the chair. What happens tomorrow? She looked out the window. The rain had stopped completely. Clouds were beginning to break apart, and the wet streets below reflected the first pieces of the night sky. I meet Daniel, and after that, I start cleaning up the mess I made. I wanted to tell her she wasn't a mess. I wanted to tell her none of this was her fault. Both things would have been lies. Life had become complicated because of choices. Some were hers, some were mine, some belonged to people who weren't even in the room. What about us? I asked quietly. She looked surprised, not because of the question, because I had finally asked it. Her eyes softened. I don't know. The honesty should have hurt. Instead, it felt strangely comforting. I know I love you, she said. I know I should have admitted it years ago. I know I can't walk backward and fix what happened. She looked at the envelope. But I also know that if this becomes another story where other people make my decisions, then I haven't learned anything. I nodded. I understand. She studied my face. You really do, don't you? I think loving someone means wanting them to choose freely. A quiet laugh escaped her. That's a very inconvenient philosophy. I've had years to practice it. She stood and walked to the bookshelf. The little blue whale was still there. She picked it up, held it for a moment, then placed it into my hands. Keep him safe. I thought he already lived here. He does. She smiled. But I think we're both going to need something to come back to. I looked at the tiny wooden carving, the chipped paint, the uneven eye. The ridiculous little thing had survived moves, breakups, bad jobs, and lonely winters. Maybe people could too. Emily walked to the door. She picked up the suitcase. This time she didn't look exhausted. She looked uncertain. There is a difference. She rested one hand on the handle and turned back toward me. When people ask me when everything changed, her voice was soft. I don't think I'll tell them about the wedding. I looked at her. I think I'll tell them about a rainy night and a man who opened his door before he knew what was waiting outside it. She smiled. I smiled back. Neither of us moved, because sometimes the most important moments in a life are not the ones where people run toward each other. They are the quiet ones, the ones where two people finally stop running away. Emily stood at the door with one hand on the suitcase and the other resting lightly against the frame. For a strange, quiet second, neither of us seemed willing to discover what happened next. Outside, dawn was beginning to steal the darkness from the city. The rain had stopped. The streets were empty. The world looked ordinary again. It felt almost insulting. She looked at me. I should go. I nodded. Neither of us moved. Then she smiled, small and uncertain. You know, what? If someone had told me a week ago that I would leave my honeymoon, cross the country, and end up here, she laughed softly. I would have called them completely insane. I probably would have agreed. She picked up the suitcase. At the door, she paused one last time. When this is over, when the lawyers, the apologies, and the anger are gone, she searched my face. Do you think people get second chances? I looked at the little blue whale on the bookshelf, at the empty place where the wedding ring had been, at the woman who had finally stopped pretending. I don't know, I admitted. I think they get honest ones. She nodded as though that answer was enough. Then she opened the door and stepped into the morning. I stood there long after she disappeared from the hallway. And sometimes I still wonder, if the person you loved arrived at your door after choosing the wrong life, would you open it? Or would you let them walk away? Tell me honestly, what would you have done?